Confidence can be a weapon in the fighting business, one that is more deadly than any punch, kick, or knee thrown. But having a mix of insane fighting ability and an unshakable self-belief that borders on cockiness, well, add those two things together and you're left with Michael Venom Page. For today's video, we're going to take a look at this man's insane highlight reel and how he never fails to put on a show for the fans. And to kick things off, what better knockout to go to than the one that put the name Michael Venom Page on the map? There is no single fighter in MMA today who has both the technical skill and undeniable cockiness to score a knockout like this one. Sure, Ben Dishman was not an elite opponent, but for MVP, he put his skills on display to a wild degree in this fight, embarrassing Dishman by totally overdoing it in the flashy department. And then, when he found his moment, he unloaded a tornado kick, one of the most over-the-top weapons in any kickboxer's arsenal. And to cap it all off, he posed for the cameras as Dishman fell, knowing that no man who ate a kick like that could ever be expected to continue. How's that for confidence? And the post-KO poses don't stop there. No, it took MVP even less time to figure out Ryan Sanders' rhythm, and the way he stood there in front of him, hands down, inviting pressure. You're just not going to find too many fighters who'd be comfortable doing that. Sanders seemed to think that his best path to victory would come from bull-rushing Michael Venom Page, but all this did was give the Englishman an easy path towards a big counter and a rapid finish. Barely a competitive fight, and further proof that Page was ready for a step up in competition. But if you thought Page looked confident against his last two opponents, well, he seemed to have absolutely zero respect for Ricky Rainey's striking skills. He wasn't even bouncing with his in and out movement. No, MVP literally just stood there, waited for his opening, and proceeded to land a huge overhand to close the show. Rainey didn't have a hope in hell of getting up after this one, marking yet another extremely pretty win to boost Page's growing confidence. Bellator had a new star in the making, and this young man's highlight reel was continuing to grow more and more impressive. Yet another vintage performance came in next when MVP took on Rudy Bears, and his taunting and constant feinting were once again at the forefront of everything here, as he lulled his opponent into making a mistake through his constant movement. And when Bears took a wrong step, Page was there, ready to capitalize with yet another big intercepting punch. And once more, there was no need for a follow-up shot. Bears was done, the ref knew it, and most importantly, Page knew it. The dude just has a level of calmness and appreciation for his own power in the cage. His sense for a finishing blow is truly next level. We're not even passing judgment on MVP when we say that he's a cocky dude, because he has kind of earned that self-confidence. But this ground game still remained a virtual unknown when he took on Charlie Ontiveros. And though he didn't really get his defense tested, once he grounded his opponent and established a powerful side control position, those long limbs came into play with violent efficiency, and he was able to rain down huge elbows on his opponent for the finish. Look, it didn't tell us how he would deal with a persistent wrestler or with a BJJ black belt on his back, but the MVP arsenal was clearly a lot more diverse than some people had imagined, and Page was by no means afraid to show us what he could do on the ground. This next one wasn't just the most brutal finish in Page's back catalogue, it was also one of the most violent moments in MMA history. Evangelista Cyborg Santos was an old veteran by the time he took on the Page, and though things were going decently for him at first, he ran headfirst into a huge flying knee from Page that left him face down on the canvas. And while MVP was celebrating by throwing a Pokeball at his opponent, little did he know what had just actually happened. That knee hadn't actually knocked Santos out. Not really. No, instead, this horrific shot had caved in Cyborg's skull. A blow that could have killed him under different circumstances. And the fact that it brought Cyborg's MMA career to a sudden halt marks its status as one of the most impactful shots ever thrown in an MMA cage. Let's make one thing clear. Richard Keeley talked his way into a fight with Michael Venom Page, and it all just ended up making enough sense for the matchmakers to eventually book it. Because on paper, this was a huge mismatch, and an even bigger one in practice. MVP basically just toyed with Keeley all fight, even losing a point on the scorecards for pretending to take a selfie with him while dominating from top position. Eventually, MVP got bored of delaying the inevitable and proceeded to land a massive flying knee that was followed by a classic Page post-fight celebration. It was clear that he had zero respect for Keeley's kickboxing background. And hey, you can't argue with the results. Trash talk Michael Venom Page at your own risk. Because if you give him added motivation to try and embarrass you, you'd better believe that he'll take it. This man's showmanship is truly on another level. When he took on Giovanni Melillo, it was the usual MVP kind of battle. He welcomed his opponent's pressure, waiting for the opportune moment to use it against him. And when Melillo got overzealous and rushed in with a kick, Page countered him with a brutal overhand that got a stiff connection right on his target's chin. And the way he just stood there afterwards was vintage MVP. How often do you actually see this guy jump in for some super necessary follow-up shot in the vein of a Georges Masvidal? Never, and that speaks volumes about his confidence and his power. When Page has you hurt to the point where your knees are shaky and that dreadful look comes across your face, that is when MVP truly comes alive. And you can tell that he sensed it off of Shinsho Anzai when they fought. It was a flying knee at first that caused Anzai to step backwards, and from there, he might as well have just tapped out there and then. Because when you start loading up for a Hail Mary, all or nothing blows on a guy like Page, that's when you've walked directly into his trap. And sure enough, he did not let Anzai off the hook there, catching him with a deft counterpunch that he has likely nailed dozens of sparring partners with over the years. Barely a contest, and yet another highlight reel finish. As if Michael Venom Page needed any more of a reason to be confident in his kicking game, the dude managed to totally bust up Goiti Yamuchi's leg with the very first kick he threw in this matchup. And it's not like you can call it a lucky shot either. He threw that kick with the intent to cause pain, and it worked. That was just pure accuracy on display. And as soon as Goiti hit the canvas in clear agony, Page already knew this fight was done, walking away with a type of leisurely calmness that we've come to expect from him. This would be the last fight of his Bellator contract, leaving Page free to finally pursue a run in the UFC. And that brings us right up to the present day. Sure, MVP didn't start off his UFC career with a KO, but all of that usual flair was on full display when he took on Kevin Holland. And with the right matchups, it will certainly be interesting to see how Michael Venom Page continues as he grows into his role as a UFC rostered fighter.